Captain Daniel Carter stood at the viewport of the horizon's edge and watched the stars blur past as his ship approached the neutral station. He had been called to Haven's Gate for what command described as a delicate diplomatic assignment. Daniel was a career officer with 15 years in deep space exploration, but this mission made him nervous in ways he couldn't quite explain to his crew. The station materialized ahead of them like a spinning wheel of light against the darkness. Haven's Gate served as the meeting point between human space and the territories of the Galactic Council. Ships from dozens of species docked here to trade and negotiate and share knowledge. Daniel had been here before, but never for something like this. His communication officer, Lieutenant Karen Wells, turned to him with a message display. Ambassador Claire Morgan had arrived and was requesting his presence at the diplomatic reception in the station's central hall. Daniel straightened his uniform and made his way to the docking port. The reception hall was filled with beings from across the known galaxy. The air hummed with translation devices converting hundreds of languages into comprehensible speech. Daniel spotted Ambassador Morgan near the observation windows and moved through the crowd toward her. She was a sharp woman in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Captain Carter, thank you for coming," Claire said as he approached. She gestured to a quieter corner away from the main gathering. "We need to talk before you meet your passengers." Daniel followed her to a private alcove, where the noise of the reception faded to a dull murmur. Claire's expression was serious, as she activated a privacy field around them. "What you're about to do is more important than Command probably told you," she began. "The Council has been asking for 200 years to survey our space and update their galactic maps. Every time we refuse, they get more curious. Now, they've pushed hard enough that we have to give them something." Daniel nodded slowly. He knew about the restrictions on alien vessels entering human territory. Every officer did. But the reasons behind those restrictions were classified above his clearance level. "You're going to take a council survey team to our border," Claire continued. "You'll show them the boundary markers and answer their questions as diplomatically as possible. But under no circumstances can you let them cross into our space. If something goes wrong and they see what's on our side, we have protocols for that too." "What kind of protocols?" Daniel asked. Claire's expression hardened. "The kind you hope you never have to use. These aliens are not our enemies, Daniel. Remember that. But they cannot know what we're protecting them from." Before he could ask more, the privacy field deactivated, and two figures approached them. The first was Commander Zekthar of the Vrin Collective, a being that stood nearly 8 feet tall on 4 legs, with 4 arms extending from a chitinous torso. His compound eyes glittered with intelligence and curiosity. The second was Science Officer Lyra of the Pelthian Union, a crystalline form that glowed with soft blue light and seemed to float rather than walk. "Ambassador Morgan, Captain Carter, it is an honor," Zekthar said through his translator. His voice had a clicking quality that the device smoothed into diplomatic tones. "We have waited long for this opportunity to finally see the edges of human space." Daniel forced a smile and extended his hand in greeting. "Welcome aboard the Horizon's Edge. We'll depart in the morning and reach the boundary in 3 days." Lyra's form pulsed with what might have been excitement. "Your species has always been so mysterious to us. You join the Council. You trade with us. You share some technology, but your borders remain closed. It is like you are hiding something wonderful. One, or something terrible," Zekthar added with what Daniel thought might be humor. The captain laughed uncomfortably. "I assure you it's neither. Just colonies and research stations. Nothing that would interest the Council." But even as he said it, Daniel knew how hollow the words sounded. The next 3 days passed in a blur of standard flight operations and increasingly pointed questions from his passengers. Zekthar wanted to know about human population distribution and defensive capabilities. Lyra asked about energy signatures her sensors detected from beyond the border. Daniel deflected and redirected as best he could, always keeping his answers vague and unremarkable. On the 3rd day, they reached the boundary. It was marked by a simple buoy floating in deep space, a sphere of metal and light that broadcast a clear message in every known language, warning ships not to proceed further without authorization from Earth Command. "This is it," Daniel announced as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Zekthar moved to the sensor station and began recording data. Lyra floated beside him, her crystalline form brightening as she processed information. "There is nothing here," Zekthar said with obvious disappointment. "No great weapons, no hidden fleets. Just empty space. That's what I told you," Daniel replied. But then Lyra made a sound like chimes in the wind. "Wait. I am detecting quantum fluctuations beyond the boundary. Very faint, but definitely artificial. What could generate such readings?" Daniel's hand moved unconsciously to the emergency protocols panel on his command chair. "Probably just interference from our communications array. These older ships generate all kinds of sensor ghosts. The Horizon's Edge is only 12 years old," Zekthar observed. "Hardly ancient by any standard." Before Daniel could respond, the ship lurched violently to one side. Alarms blared across the bridge as the lights flickered. Karen Wells gripped her console as she worked to diagnose the problem. "Engineering reports a catastrophic failure in the port fusion chamber," she shouted over the noise. "We're losing power and momentum. Captain, we're drifting across the boundary." Daniel's blood went cold. He slammed his hand on the communications panel. "Emergency broadcast to Earth Command. Authorization, Carter 9-7 Alpha. We have crossed the border with alien nationals aboard. I repeat, we have violated the boundary protocols." The ship continued to drift as its engines sputtered and died. Through the viewport, Daniel could see the boundary buoy growing smaller behind them. They were inside human space now, and his passengers were about to see things that no alien had witnessed in 2 centuries. Zekthar looked at him with all 4 eyes wide. "Captain, why do you look so afraid? This is just a mechanical failure. We will wait for rescue and return to the neutral zone." Daniel met the alien commander's gaze and said nothing. But his hand never left the emergency protocols panel. Whatever happened next, his mission had just become infinitely more complicated than a simple border tour. The Horizon's Edge tumbled through space like a wounded bird as emergency systems struggled to compensate for the failing engines. Daniel Carter barked orders to his crew while simultaneously watching his alien passengers with growing anxiety. Zekthar had moved to the auxiliary sensor station and was already scanning their surroundings. Lyra floated near the viewport, her crystalline form pulsing with colors Daniel had never seen before. "Captain, I am reading several large structures ahead," Zekthar announced. "They appear to be stations or platforms of some kind. The energy output is remarkable." Daniel wanted to order him away from the sensors, but that would only make the situation more suspicious. Instead, he focused on damage control. "Lieutenant Wells, get me a status report from engineering. How long until we can restore power?" Karen's face was tight with stress as she relayed information from below decks. "Chief says at least 6 hours for minimal propulsion. The fusion chamber basically melted. He's never seen a failure like this. 6 hours." Daniel's mind raced through the possibilities. They were drifting deeper into human space with every passing minute. Already they had traveled far enough that the stations Zekthar mentioned would be visible on long-range sensors. Those installations were classified at the highest levels. No alien was supposed to know they existed. "I have sent a distress signal on all human frequencies," Karen reported. "Earth Command acknowledges and says a rescue vessel is being dispatched." Daniel nodded, but his stomach was in knots. He activated his command console's secure channel and sent a coded message that only human military vessels would recognize. The code was simple, but its meaning was clear. Containment protocol required. Alien exposure to classified installations. He added his authorization code and hoped whoever responded would understand the delicacy of the situation. Lyra suddenly brightened with excitement. "Captain Carter, these structures we are approaching are extraordinary. My sensors indicate they are generating a field of some kind. The quantum fluctuations I detected earlier are coming from them. They're just research stations, Daniel lied smoothly. We study exotic particles out here. Nothing that would interest the Council. But Zekthar was not so easily dismissed. The Vryn were known throughout the galaxy for their scientific curiosity and analytical minds. I have never encountered research stations on this scale. Each one appears to be the size of a small moon. What kind of particle research requires such massive infrastructure? Daniel stood and walked to the viewport. Through the darkness of space, he could see the stations now, even with his naked eyes. 7 of them arranged in a perfect geometric pattern, and each one blazing with energy that made them visible from thousands of kilometers away. They were part of the network that surrounded all of human space, but he could never tell these aliens that. Classified research, he said firmly. I'm not authorized to discuss it further. The next 4 hours were torture. Daniel watched as Zekthar and Lyra continued their scans and took notes, and asked questions he couldn't answer. His crew went about their repairs with practiced efficiency, but he could see the tension in their faces. Everyone aboard knew what it meant to have aliens this deep in human territory. Finally, Karen looked up from her console with relief in her eyes. Captain, we have a vessel approaching. It's the Freedom's call. Daniel felt his tension ease slightly, but only slightly. The Freedom's call was a battle carrier, one of the largest warships in Earth's fleet. Its presence meant that Command was taking this situation very seriously. Open a channel, he ordered. The view screen activated to show the bridge of the battle carrier. Admiral Patricia Hayes sat in the command chair, looking every bit as stern as her reputation suggested. She was in her 60s with steel-gray hair cut short and eyes that could cut through titanium. Behind her, Daniel could see the organized chaos of a military vessel on high alert. Captain Carter, I understand you've had some trouble, Patricia said, in a tone that suggested this was anything but routine trouble. Yes, Admiral. Catastrophic engine failure during our boundary tour. We drifted across the line with our Council passengers aboard. Endin. Patricia's gaze shifted to where Zekthar and Lyra stood watching the exchange. Commander Zekthar, Science Officer Lyra. I am Admiral Patricia Hayes, of Earth Defense Command. We will be taking you aboard for transfer back to neutral space. Your cooperation in this matter is appreciated. Zekthar stepped forward, with all 4 arms spread in a gesture of peaceful intent. Admiral, we are grateful for the rescue. However, we have collected valuable scientific data during our time in human space. This information could be beneficial to all Council species. End quote. Patricia's expression did not change. I'm afraid I must insist that all sensor data collected within our borders be deleted immediately. This is not a request, Commander. It is a condition of your safe return. That is unacceptable, Zekthar replied, his translator making his tone sound harsh. Council law guarantees scientific freedom and the free exchange of information. We cannot simply destroy our research. Council law ends where our space begins, Patricia said coldly. You have seen things you were not meant to see. Those observations are classified by Earth government and cannot leave this region. Lyra's form pulsed with agitation. You cannot expect us to remain silent about installations of this magnitude. The scientific community has a right to know about advances in particle physics and quantum field generation. Daniel watched this exchange with growing dread. The aliens were not going to cooperate willingly. That meant Patricia would have to use more aggressive protocols. He hoped it would not come to actual force, but the weapons systems on the Freedom's call were undoubtedly active and ready. Captain Carter, prepare your passengers for transport, Patricia ordered. My people will conduct a thorough sweep of all sensor systems on the horizon's edge. Any data pertaining to human installations will be scrubbed. Over the next hour, Daniel oversaw the transfer of Zekthar and Lyra to the battle carrier. Both aliens protested, but ultimately complied when it became clear they had no choice. A team of technicians came aboard and began systematically wiping the ship's computer systems of any information collected since they crossed the boundary. As the last of the technicians prepared to leave, a young engineer named Kyle Martinez approached Daniel with an embarrassed expression. "Captain, I think I left my personal data pad in the alien shuttle. Is it possible to retrieve it?" Daniel was about to dismiss the request when Karen touched his arm. "Sir, the shuttle has already been sealed for transport back to neutral space. Admiral Hayes gave orders not to delay the transfer." The captain sighed. "It's just a data pad, Kyle. Request a replacement from supply." Kyle nodded but looked unhappy. Daniel thought nothing more of it as he watched the Freedom's Call turn and begin escorting the alien shuttle back toward the boundary. The crisis seemed to be over, but as the battle carrier disappeared into the distance, Daniel could not shake the feeling that something had gone wrong. Some small detail that would come back to haunt them all. He returned to his command chair and ordered his crew to complete repairs. The sooner they got away from this cursed region of space, the better. Commander Zekthar sat in his quarters aboard Haven's Gate Station and stared at the datapad he had found wedged between two seats in the shuttle. The device belonged to the human engineer Kyle Martinez and had apparently been left behind by accident during the rushed transfer from the Freedom's Call. He turned it over in two of his hands while his other two worked at his computer terminal. Lyra materialized through the wall of his quarters in her typical fashion. The Pelthian had little regard for solid barriers when in her energy form. "You found something," she stated, rather than asked. "The human left this behind," Zekthar replied. "I was going to return it through diplomatic channels, but then I noticed it was not locked. The security on these personal devices is usually quite sophisticated. Perhaps he disabled it by accident," Lyra suggested. But her tone indicated she found this unlikely. Zekthar activated the device and began scrolling through its contents. Most of it was mundane. Personal messages, entertainment files, technical manuals for standard ship systems. But buried in a folder marked with innocuous maintenance codes, he found something else. A file labeled Project Guardian. He opened it, and both aliens fell silent as they read. The file was heavily redacted, with most details removed or corrupted. But what remained was enough to paint a disturbing picture. References to defensive installations surrounding all human space. Mention of threats from beyond known space. Technical specifications for something called quantum probability generators that seemed to defy understood physics. "This cannot be accurate," Zekthar said slowly. "Quantum probability manipulation is theoretical. No species has achieved practical applications." Lyra's form dimmed with concern. "Yet we saw those installations with our own eyes. The energy output alone suggests technology far beyond what humanity has shared with the Council. Why would they hide such advances? And why build a defensive network on this scale?" Zekthar added. "Humanity has no enemies. They are at peace with all Council species. What are they defending against?" The two aliens looked at each other in the silence of the quarters. Finally, Lyra spoke. "We must bring this to the Council. They need to know that humanity is concealing something of this magnitude." 3 days later, they stood before the Council's Security Committee in a chamber designed to amplify the voices of its speakers. Representatives from 20 species occupied seats arranged in a circle around the central floor where Zekthar and Lyra presented their findings. The Vryn commander displayed the file on holographic projectors while explaining what they had witnessed in human space. When he finished, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then High Arbiter Kelvan of the Tross Confederation spoke. His species was known for their diplomatic skills and measured responses. "These are serious allegations, Commander Zekthar. You claim that humanity has developed weapons technology in secret and built a massive defensive network without informing the Council." "Not weapons," Lyra interjected. "The file suggests something else entirely. A defensive system against an unspecified threat. We believe the Council should investigate further." Another Council member, Representative Shore of the Unified Clans, leaned forward. "This file could be fabricated. Human security would never allow such sensitive information to remain on an unsecured personal device. Zekthar had considered this possibility. Perhaps. But we saw the installations ourselves. 7 massive structures, generating energy signatures that match nothing in council databases. Those are not fabrications. The debate continued for hours. Some council members expressed concern and called for investigation. Others dismissed the evidence as incomplete or misinterpreted. By the end of the session, no decision had been reached. The committee would review the matter and provide guidance at a future meeting. But when Zekthar returned to his quarters that evening, he found a message waiting. It was from High Arbiter Kelvan and marked private. The message was brief and chilling. Your concerns have been noted, but the council has decided not to pursue this matter further. It would be wise to let this issue rest. The Vryn commander felt anger rise in his chest. He had expected bureaucracy, but not outright dismissal. The next morning, he submitted a formal request to organize an independent investigation. By afternoon, he received notice that he had been relieved of his position pending review of his conduct during the border incident. Apparently, Admiral Hayes had filed a complaint about his refusal to delete sensor data. Lyra fared no better. When she attempted to publish her findings to the scientific community, her paper was rejected by every major journal. Editors cited lack of peer review and insufficient evidence. When she pressed harder, she received a visit from Pelthian security officials who warned her that continuing this line of research would be considered unwise for her career and possibly her safety. Frustrated and confused, Zekthar sent a coded message to the one human he thought might help them understand what was happening. Captain Daniel Carter responded 3 days later with coordinates for a meeting in a civilian sector of Haven's Gate. The location was a dingy bar frequented by merchants and traders, where the noise and crowd would make surveillance difficult. Daniel arrived wearing civilian clothes and looking uncomfortable. He took a seat across from Zekthar and Lyra in a dark corner booth and ordered a drink he barely touched. "You shouldn't have contacted me," he said quietly. "I'm being watched now because of what happened on the horizon's edge. We need answers," Zekthar insisted. "The council is covering something up. Your government is hiding something. People deserve to know the truth." Daniel laughed bitterly. "The truth? You want the truth even if it destroys everything you think you know about the galaxy?" Lyra leaned forward, her crystalline form barely visible in the dim light. Yes, the human captain was silent for a long time. He seemed to be wrestling with some internal decision. Finally, he spoke in a voice so low, they had to strain to hear him. "You want to know why the map ends at human space? Because what's on the other side of human space is not on anyone's map. And pray you never need to know more than that." "That is not enough," Zekthar said firmly. Daniel met his eyes. "It has to be enough. Because if I tell you more, I'll be committing treason. And you'll carry a burden that will haunt you for the rest of your lives." But Lyra persisted. "Those installations we saw are protecting something, or protecting against something. Which is it?" The captain finished his drink in one gulp. "Both." He stood to leave but paused. "If you really can't let this go, there's someone who might talk to you. Dr. Helen Brooks. She's a retired xenobiologist living on New Terra, one of our frontier worlds. She was there at the beginning. She knows what we found. But don't say I sent you. And don't blame me for what you learn." Before either alien could ask more questions, Daniel Carter walked out of the bar and disappeared into the crowd. Zekthar and Lyra sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, the Vryn commander made a decision. "We go to New Terra. That will require entering human space again without authorization," Lyra pointed out. "We could be arrested. Or worse. Then we will be careful," Zekthar replied. "But I cannot rest without knowing what humanity is hiding. Can you?" The Pelthian's form pulsed with determination. "No. We leave tomorrow." Neither of them noticed the figure watching from across the bar. A human woman with gray-streaked hair who spoke quietly into a communication device. Ambassador Claire Morgan had been tracking the aliens since they started asking questions. Now she needed to decide whether to stop them or let them find the truth that humanity had kept secret for 200 years. The smuggler's ship that carried Zekthar and Lyra into human space was cramped and smelled of recycled air and questionable cargo. The captain was a grizzled trader named Vincent Cole, who asked no questions as long as his payment cleared. He dropped them at New Terra's orbital station with a warning. Whatever you're looking for down there, make it quick. Human frontier worlds don't take kindly to unauthorized aliens. New Terra was a world of red deserts and scattered colonies clinging to the few water sources that made life possible. The planet had been settled 60 years ago and still felt raw and unfinished. Zekthar and Lyra took a surface shuttle to the coordinates Daniel had provided, a remote research station far from the main settlements. The station was a collection of prefabricated buildings half buried in the sand to protect against the fierce dust storms that swept across the plains. Solar panels covered every available surface, and a communications array pointed toward the sky. It looked abandoned until a figure emerged from the main building as their shuttle landed. Dr. Helen Brooks was old by human standards. Her face was lined with wrinkles, and her hair had gone completely white. But her eyes were sharp and clear as she watched the two aliens disembark. She carried no weapon, but her stance suggested she would not hesitate to defend herself if necessary. "I wondered when someone would come asking questions," she said as they approached. "Daniel sent you, didn't he?" Zekthar nodded. "He said you would tell us the truth about what humanity is hiding." Helen studied them for a long moment. The truth. Such a simple word for something so terrible. She turned and walked back toward the building. "Come inside. The sun out here will kill you in an hour, without proper protection." The interior of the research station was cluttered with equipment and data storage units. Holographic displays showed star charts and biological data that Zekthar could not immediately interpret. Helen gestured to chairs while she poured herself a cup of some dark human beverage. "I'm going to show you things that are classified at levels you can't imagine," she began. "Things that could start a panic across the entire galaxy if they became public knowledge. Are you sure you want this burden?" 1. Lyra's crystalline form pulsed with determination. "We are sure." Helen nodded and activated a holographic projector. The image showed a human colony ship approaching a distant world. The date stamp indicated this was 63 years ago, before humanity had made contact with the Galactic Council. "This was the colony ship New Horizon," Helen explained. "It was carrying 10,000 settlers to establish humanity's furthest outpost. They reached their destination and began setting up the colony. Communications were good for the first month. Then, they went silent." Colony. The hologram shifted to show another scene. A rescue vessel approaching the same world months later. When the rescue team arrived, this is what they found. The image made both aliens recoil. The colony buildings were gone. Not destroyed, but dissolved as if they had been reduced to their component molecules. The ground where the settlement had stood was smooth and glassy. Vegetation for kilometers around had been stripped away. Even the rocks showed signs of molecular degradation. 10,000 people, Helen said quietly. Vanished, without a trace. No bodies, no equipment, nothing. It was like they had been erased from existence. Zekthar felt his limbs trembling. "What could do this?" "We didn't know," Helen replied. But it happened again. And again. 3 more colonies in the next year. Each one stripped clean. No survivors, no evidence. Just empty worlds where thriving settlements had been. The hologram cycled through images of devastation. Each colony showed the same pattern of molecular dissolution. In one scene, only half a building remained, the rest simply gone as if cut away by an impossibly precise blade. "We sent military vessels," Helen continued. "Heavily armed battleships to protect the colonies. Here's what happened to the first one." 1. The hologram showed a warship in space. Suddenly, something moved in the darkness beyond it. The image quality was poor, but Zekthar could make out a shape. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of the battleship. It moved with purpose and terrible grace. When it touched the warship, the vessel simply came apart, metal and machinery dissolving into clouds of elementary particles. "We called them the Devourers," Helen said, "because that's what they do. They consume matter and energy and information. Everything they touch is reduced to its most basic state and absorbed. We don't know if they're alive, or machines, or something else entirely. We just know they were drawn to our expansion, like predators following prey." Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "How many ships did you lose?" 47 warships in the first year of fighting," Helen replied. "Along with another 6 colonies. Billions of people dead or vanished. We tried everything. Nuclear weapons passed through them without effect. Energy weapons were absorbed. Kinetic projectiles dissolved on contact. Conventional warfare was completely useless. The hologram showed scenes from what humans called the Silent War. Fleets of ships engaging massive entities in the darkness between stars. Every encounter ended the same way, with human vessels dissolving and the Devourers moving on to the next target. "Where do they come from?" Zekthar asked. Helen pointed to a star chart. "Beyond the galactic rim. In the space between galaxies, where matter is sparse and stars are rare. We think they evolved, or were created in that void. They exist on the edge of what's physically possible in our universe. And they were migrating inward, drawn by the energy signatures of civilization." She changed the hologram to show a simulation. Hundreds of the Devourer entities, moving slowly but inexorably toward the bright spiral of the galaxy. If they reached populated space, they would consume everything. Every world, every station, every ship. The entire Galactic Council would be extinct within decades. The silence in the room was absolute. Finally, Lyra spoke. "But they did not reach us. Humanity stopped them." "How?" Helen smiled grimly. "We couldn't fight them, so we had to hide from them. Dr. Alan Porter at the Institute for Advanced Physics came up with the theory. The Devourers perceive reality through quantum interactions. They sense the probability waves of matter and energy. If we could alter those waves in a controlled area, we could make ourselves invisible to them." Quote, she pulled up technical schematics that made Zekthar's head hurt just looking at them. Project Guardian was born from that theory. Quantum probability generators that create a bubble of altered physics around protected space. Inside the bubble, reality functions normally, but from outside, trying to look in from beyond human space, we phase out of their perception. They can't see us, can't sense us, can't interact with us. The installations we saw, Lyra said with sudden understanding. "Part of the network," Helen confirmed. "We built hundreds of them. They surround all of human space in a complete sphere. Every gap is covered, every angle protected. As long as the network is active, the Devourers pass right through our region of space without ever knowing we're here." Zekthar stood and paced the room with all 4 legs. "You have been protecting the entire galaxy for 60 years and told no one." "We told the council leadership," Helen corrected. "The inner circle knows. They've known for decades. But they made the same decision we did. Telling the general population would cause panic. What could anyone do with that information? Except live in fear. So the map ends at human space because," Lyra began. "Because we can't expand," Helen finished. "Every new colony would require extending the Guardian network. That takes resources and time, and most importantly, it creates gaps while we're building. Any gap and the Devourers could flood through. We're trapped inside our own protection." She pulled up one final image, a long-range sensor scan showing the space beyond human territory. Massive shapes moved in the darkness, dozens of them drifting through the void. They're still out there. Still searching. Still hungry. We didn't defeat them. We just learned to hide so well they forgot we exist. Zekthar felt the weight of this knowledge settling on him like a physical burden. Why are you telling us this? Why now? Why? Helen's expression was tired and sad. Because the network is failing. The quantum generators have a limited lifespan. We're replacing them as fast as we can, but each year, it gets harder. Eventually, we won't be able to maintain the coverage. And when that happens, the devourers will find us again. And this time, all of you will be in their path too. The journey back to Council Space felt longer than the trip out. Zekthar and Lyra sat in silence on the smuggler's ship as Vincent Cole navigated through human territory without asking about what they had learned. When they finally reached Haven's Gate station, both aliens moved through the docking procedures like automatons, their minds still processing the terrible truth Helen Brooks had revealed. They went directly to the council chambers, but were stopped at the entrance by security. High Arbiter Kelvan himself emerged from the inner chambers with an expression that could have been sympathy or warning. Commander Zekthar, Science Officer Lyra, I understand you have returned from an unauthorized journey into human space. We know about the Devourers, Zekthar said bluntly. We know about Project Guardian. We know that you have been lying to your own people for decades. Kelvin glanced at the security guards and gestured for privacy. When they were alone in a side chamber, the High Arbiter's diplomatic mask slipped slightly. So, Helen Brooks told you everything. I warned Earth Command this would happen eventually. Secrets of this magnitude cannot be kept forever. You knew, Lyra accused. The inner circle of the Council has known what humanity was protecting us from. Of course we knew, Kelvan replied. The human ambassador told us 40 years ago when they first requested resource support for Guardian network maintenance. We had to make a choice then, tell our populations that an existential threat lurks beyond known space, or maintain the comfortable lie that we live in a safe galaxy. We chose the lie. 1. Zekthar felt his anger rising. People have a right to know. They deserve to understand what dangers exist. Do they? Kelvan challenged. What would that knowledge accomplish except fear? Humanity is handling the threat. The network protects us all. Why burden billions of beings with terror they can do nothing about? Before either alien could respond, the chamber door opened, and Ambassador Claire Morgan entered. She looked tired, but not surprised to see them. I see you made it to New Terra after all. I should have stopped you. But Daniel was right. The secret was getting too heavy to carry alone. The network is failing, Lyra said. Dr. Brooks told us. In 20 years or less, the protection will collapse. Claire nodded. 18 years by our most optimistic projections. 12 if we can't secure additional resources. That's why I'm here. Earth's government has decided to tell the full council the truth and ask for help. Kelvan looked alarmed. That decision should go through proper diplomatic channels. You cannot simply announce this to the General Assembly. Watch me, Claire replied coldly. We've protected this galaxy for 60 years with our blood and resources. Now we need help, and you're going to provide it or explain to your people why you let them remain ignorant, while humanity shouldered the burden alone. The next week was a blur of frantic preparation. Daniel Carter was recalled from patrol duty to provide his account of the border incident. Helen Brooks was brought from New Terra, despite her protests, to serve as technical advisor. Admiral Patricia Hayes arrived with detailed briefings on the current state of the Guardian network and humanity's resource limitations. The day of the assembly, the council chambers were packed with representatives from every member species. Rumors had been spreading that humanity would make a major announcement. Some speculated about new technology sharing. Others worried about a political crisis. None suspected the truth. Ambassador Claire Morgan stood at the central podium and activated the holographic systems. Members of the Galactic Council, what I am about to share with you will challenge everything you believe about the safety of our galaxy. I ask that you listen completely before passing judgment. She began with the history of human expansion and the first colony losses. The chamber fell silent as images of dissolved settlements appeared above their heads. Gasps and exclamations rippled through the crowd when the Devourers were revealed. By the time Claire explained Project Guardian and the 60-year silent vigil humanity had maintained, the assembly was in chaos. Representative Shore of the unified clan stood and shouted over the noise. "This is madness! You expect us to believe that humanity has been fighting invisible monsters while the Council remained ignorant?" "Not fighting," Admiral Patricia Hayes corrected as she took the podium. "We learned to make ourselves invisible and extended that protection to cover all of you whether you knew it or not." Another representative demanded proof. Daniel Carter provided his sensor logs from the horizon's edge showing the Guardian installations. Zekthar and Lyra added their testimony about what they had witnessed and learned. Helen Brooks displayed the technical specifications of the quantum probability generators in detail that no one could claim was fabricated. The debate raged for hours. Some species refused to believe the threat was real. Others accused humanity of creating an elaborate hoax to gain political leverage. A few representatives from militaristic species demanded access to Guardian technology for their own defensive purposes. But slowly, as more evidence accumulated and more questions were answered, acceptance began to spread through the chamber. The Devourers were real. The threat was genuine, and humanity had been standing guard while everyone else slept peacefully. Finally, Claire made her formal request. Earth needs resources to build a new generation of Guardian stations. We need scientific minds to improve the technology. We need industrial capacity to manufacture components. Most of all, we need the Council to acknowledge that this is not just humanity's problem. The Devourers don't care about species or politics. If our network fails, they will consume everything in their path. What you're proposing would require unprecedented cooperation, Kelvan said slowly. Sharing classified military technology. Combining resources across dozens of species. The logistics alone are staggering. The alternative is extinction. Patricia stated flatly. Your choice is simple. Help us strengthen the shield that protects you, or prepare for the consequences when it fails. The vote was called 3 days later after countless committee meetings and backroom negotiations. The resolution was simple. The Galactic Council would establish the Joint Guardian Initiative, committing resources and personnel to support humanity's defensive network and research into improved protection methods. The vote was not unanimous. Several species abstained, and a few voted against out of skepticism or political maneuvering. But the majority approved the measure. For the first time in history, the Council would unite behind a common defensive project. 3 months after the vote, Daniel Carter stood on the observation deck of Guardian Station 7 Alpha and watched the construction below. Mixed crews of humans and aliens worked side by side, assembling a new generation of quantum probability generators. The design incorporated improvements from Pelthian energy manipulation techniques and Vrin computational modeling. It would be 50% more efficient than the old stations and last twice as long. Beside him stood Zekthar and Lyra, both of whom had volunteered for the Joint Guardian Initiative. The Vrin commander had been reinstated with honors once the truth became public. Lyra's research into quantum field applications was now considered vital to the project's success. It's strange, Daniel mused. For 200 years we kept everyone at arm's length. Now we're working together like we should have from the beginning. Fear makes people isolate themselves, Lyra observed. Courage allows them to reach out. Zekthar gestured with 2 of his arms toward the viewport. The map ends at human space, because that's where your species made its stand against the darkness. But perhaps the map doesn't need to end there anymore. Daniel nodded. Maybe the line we drew wasn't meant to be a border forever. Maybe it's a foundation, something we can all build on together. No. Far below, an alien engineer bumped into Kyle Martinez, and the two laughed as they worked to secure a plasma conduit. Across the station, human scientists collaborated with Council researchers on theoretical improvements to the Guardian field equations. In the command center, Admiral Hayes coordinated with representatives from a dozen species on expansion plans that would strengthen coverage across vulnerable sectors. But in the observation deck, Daniel's console beeped with a priority alert. He accessed the message and felt his blood go cold. It was from a deep space monitoring station on the far edge of human space. Long-range sensors had detected movement in the void beyond the network. The Devourers were stirring. Daniel shared the report with his companions. Zekthar studied the data with his analytical mind. They seemed to be concentrating in this sector, almost like they sensed something. The network has been fluctuating while we upgrade systems, Lyra noted. Perhaps they detected the instability. Or they know we're here, and they're probing for weaknesses, Daniel said grimly. But instead of fear, he felt something else. Determination. Because this time, humanity wasn't facing the threat alone. This time, when the Devourers tested the shield, they would find it stronger than ever before. Not just human ingenuity, but the combined knowledge of dozens of species working toward a common goal. The galaxy may not have known what lay beyond the edge of the map, but now they did. And now they stood together on the wall that humanity had built. The Devourers were patient. They had waited for 60 years and could wait 60 more. But the species of the Galactic Council were patient too. And they had something the Devourers did not. They had each other. The map ended at human space because that's where the known galaxy met the unknown void. But it was also where isolated species became allies, and fear transformed into shared purpose. Whatever came from the darkness beyond, it would not find them unprepared.